Hi, folks. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining me. I have to assume that people have joined me because right now I'm not actually seeing. Um, ah, Two people have shown up. I'm accustomed to doing this on Facebook, but because of some challenges, so I guess let me get into that. Let me explain that properly. Normally, I would be multi-streaming or simulcasting the live, and the live would be on Facebook, the live would also be on YouTube happening at the same time. But there was a series that I was looking at on Netflix about the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Had that series up and running, made a comment about it on social media 2 weeks ago, 2 weekends ago. I did it let me see. Let's say I looked at it I binge watched on the Friday or the Saturday. The Saturday morning, I think I put up a post basically saying, if you are interested in crime stories, especially stories about serial killers and how serial killers think, then you should check out Dahmer. And do you know, Facebook put a restriction on my account. I've heard people talk about being in Facebook jail. I am in Facebook jail for 29 days, well, 19 more days, basically because I put up a post saying to people, if you are interested in true crime stories, take a look at this particular take a look at this particular series on Netflix. So as a result of that, I can't share lives via any of my pages. I can't, there are a whole bunch of things that I can't do from any of my pages or from my profile. I'm in a position now where I can actually post things to my profile again, but I can't necessarily do a live. Even if I have multiple admins for the Newsauce page, so even if I use any of the accounts of the other admins, I can't do a live. So because of that, I decided I'm only going to be using YouTube. So it means that I have to spend some time building traction and making sure more people watch the program or watch things through the YouTube channel. But I don't have a problem doing that hard work at all. So let me say good evening to everybody who's here. Normally by now I have several hundred people on the live, but now I have, well, how many are you all? 57 persons. So I'm very happy. Delia, Lenley's, Ricardo, Philip, Nigel Redhead, Matthew Rat, Janelle Speth, Joy, Fireball, Althea, Jazzy, and Kay, and Kyle, and Hillary. All of you that are here this evening, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you all enjoy the program. So, apart from the block from Facebook, the next piece of drama was I developed some back pains over the weekend. And as you know, I have 2 dogs. And between the 2 dogs and the back pain, I was like, there is no way I am going to try to do a live on the weekend. And it is probably for the best that I didn't do the live on the weekend, because of course there was the opportunity for the news stories that I want to comment on, to do analysis on this evening, to kind of develop in a particular way. So I was very, very, very happy that I made the decision. So by the time things happened and things developed and things snowballed, I had said to myself, if I have the time midweek this week, I will come on and I will do a show with you all. I will go live with you all this week. And it so happens that I'm in a position to do a live this Wednesday evening. Hi Island Eye, hi Annie Marie, Flo Nicholas. I'm seeing lots of new people, lots of new names that I wouldn't necessarily see if I was doing the live on both Facebook and YouTube. So I'm happy to see all of you. Happy to see all of you here. So let me get into the thing. And there are a number of things that I want to cover, because I want to cover stuff from 2 weeks ago that I should have been covering, and of course the contemporary thing. So where are we starting? The first thing today, there was a lot of rain today. I'm sure you all have seen the rain. There's a very disturbing video that I saw earlier today. Let me see if I can pull it up and show it to you. So So that gentleman, I'm hoping that they find him. Yes, it was rain for so today. Lots and lots and lots of rain. And when I got up this morning to head to work, got to work, and well, there was a lot that happened today, and I said to myself, you know what, today really and truly is the best day for me to do this live, because I picked up my goodly self. Most of you who follow me know this. I worked remotely for all of the period of the pandemic, from March 2020 up until August, like this August just gone here. I worked from home, was working virtually, teaching all of my classes online. And when you're working from home, there are a number of things that you no longer have to deal with. You don't have to deal up with traffic. You don't have to deal up with congestion. When disasters take place outside of your home, or that aren't impacting your home directly, there are a number of things that you just do not have to contend with and deal up with on a daily basis. Because I have now returned to work, this morning I got up and I had to face that heavy rain and traffic to get down to the campus. And then when I got onto the campus, the weather was so bad by then, because my first class this morning was at 10 o'clock. So I got to the campus at 9:30. By the time I got down to the campus, the weather was so bad, students couldn't even make it to classrooms. There was so much water everywhere, not just on the campus, off the campus, in the environs of St. Augustine. And St. Augustine is a town that generally floods whenever there's a lot of rain because of all of the urban development in St. Augustine. So by the time it was 10:30, 11 o'clock, you couldn't actually teach classes because students couldn't even get to the classrooms themselves. And so between 11 and 12, classes were cancelled for the rest of the day. So I got up, left my house, made my way down to the University of the West Indies campus, basically for no reason. Now here's the thing. Prior to this return, this everybody having to be face-to-face, everybody having to be back on the campus, prior to that, we would have been in a position where everybody would have been teaching their classes virtually. So all of the class cancellations that took place today would more likely than not have taken place if we were working virtually. And I was sitting in a classroom chatting with some friends of mine, co-workers of mine, and we were saying, you know, when things like a yellow alert happens, a weather-related yellow alert happens, ideally, not just us at the University of the West Indies, ideally arrangements should be in place at any number of organizations for people to work remotely. That's why developing a work from home policy is so critical. Listen, this is not the first rainy season we have had. It's not going to be the only rainy season we have had. We are going to continue to have rainy seasons, forever. So why are we not seizing the opportunity to develop a coherent, workable work from home policy that will bring an end to all of this stress and frustration that you'd have been hearing about? I was just looking at some news from TTT that would have aired 2 hours ago, looking at the flooding, hearing stories about people who fall down in water and get swept away by floodwaters, seeing images of cars being trapped in floodwaters, seeing images of cars trying to get from the eastbound lane of the highway onto the westbound lane of the highway to be able to get home. I mean, it's craziness. It is not that we don't have templates in other parts of the world that we can look at and adapt and adopt to suit our needs. So, what is really going on here? But Shakira, I hear you and I see you when they say we lack discipline. I don't want to jump the gun because I plan to touch on that. I had a touch on it. I can't not touch on it. So let me get into the program. Let me start to talk the things, right? So there's another person that get impacted by floodwaters and things. So meanwhile, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have been dealing with insults and tone-deaf comments and poorly phrased comments from members of the government and people in positions of power in the way in which we know best. Memes, right? So poor Keith Scotland, or maybe not poor Keith Scotland, he get memed down the place between Friday and now. And I am going to get into the memes surrounding Scotland and other members of the government and why, you know, they look for the heat that they get. But before we jump into that bit, 2 weeks now, I want to talk to you about Farley Augustine. Because of course, 2 weeks ago, I would have talked about the THA. 3 weeks ago, not 2 weeks ago, 3 to 4 weeks ago, I would have discussed the THA on here, right? We would have looked at a press conference that the THA had done. And there are a number of things that we would have discussed about the THA, but the major thing would have been expenditure. After Watson sent us at a kiss for Farley 2 weeks ago, between 2 to 3 weeks ago, and all of this quarrel was taking place between the two of them, a very interesting post came up on social media. And I want all you to see that post. So this is Keon Warner. And Keon Warner is related to the Warners of Tobago that own a construction company. I think Alan Warner, etc., etc., etc. Avril, I see you saying that Tobago quiet these days. It is not that Tobago quiet these days. That's not how it does work. Let me tell you how it does work. Media just pick and choose what they want to focus on. And it is no longer interesting to them to focus on Tobago when the budget land, because they want to be able to use the budget to whip the population into a particular frenzy. But Keon Warner, and when all I get a chance, I want all to go to Facebook and look at this post from Keon Warner. Because Ansel Dennis, who would have been the former chief secretary of the THA, let me not make this so big. Ansel Dennis responded to allegations that were made by Farley about 2 to 2.5 weeks ago. Farley held a press conference. It would have been, I think, the regular THA press conference. And at the press conference, Farley did something that reminded me of Kamla Persad-Visessa. Farley come and he make allegations. He talk about an audit, but he had no audit report. Up to now, and it's a good solid 2 weeks now. 2 weeks now, I waiting for a copy of this audit report. 2 weeks now, 2 weeks ago, I asked, is there an audit report? Because Farley talks about the audit, and he talked about the audit having very interesting things in it, and he alluded to contractors having made ridiculous sums of money and also alleging misbehavior in public office with respect to the contractors and them, and then nothing. So the statement is made at a press conference, and then nothing happens after that. He doesn't produce the documents. He does not produce the audit. There are no actual figures, or there are no actual names named. All we have is Farley pulling a Kamla, waving blank pieces of paper, saying he have an audit, throwing mud in a particular direction, but then no information thereafter. So Ansel Dennis, not too long after Farley made his statement. So let me say Farley make his statements on a Wednesday or a Thursday. By the Friday, Farley, Ansel Dennis would have come on and he would have held his own press conference. And in that press conference, Ansel talked about things that would have happened under during his time at the THA and thereafter that he was aware of. And then on the 28th of September, Keon Warner put up this post. And the post basically points to behavior inside of the THA that is not seemly behavior. Contractors being blacklisted, and the allegations are that contractors are being blacklisted because they have not supported the PDP. Further to that, Keon Warner is pointing out that there are contractors in Tobago that are capable of doing the work, the construction work, the developmental work that the THA puts out contracts for. But those contractors, those Tobagonian contractors, are being bypassed in favor of Trinidadian contractors that have been loyal and supportive of the PDP. So I will leave you all to take a chance and go and look at what Keon Warner posted, because it's a really long post. This is only the first quarter of it, but you should take a read of it, because he names names and he gives details and he points out a fair amount of I guess unfair treatment that he would have faced and he would have dealt with, and he would be affiliated with one of the larger, if not the largest, construction company on the island of Tobago. So when you get a minute, go and take a look at that post from Keon Warner, because at some point in time we're going to have to go back to the THA and activities at the THA, because I sense that we have not heard the last of things with the THA. So I'm seeing some new people coming on. Hi Rena, hi Hillary. Formerly Luther Attack. The media isn't covering a lot of what is taking place inside of the THA. As a matter of fact, Liz Williams has been called out by persons from Tobago. They've been saying to her that she needs to be doing a better job of covering things. I have no idea who COS is and why COS feels that he, she, it, or they should be wasting their time on a Wednesday evening on my live. I mean, thank you so much for building my numbers, but nobody forcing you to be here, my darling. Nobody is forcing you to be here. So that is Farley. That's Farley and them. Now, there's another opposition type person I wanted to talk about a little bit. So this week, Clico Karen, or within the last 2 weeks, Clico Karen has reared her head. So let's take a look at what Clico Karen has to say for herself.
That I believe that I have a responsibility, whilst I am here on this earth and part of this country and love of my country and the experience I have had, and the education and all that goes with it, offer myself in service to the people of Trinidad. So let me just make it clear, right?
That's not. You know what? Let me see. Maybe I should just play it on the iPad and done. That's what
whilst I am here on this earth and part of this country and love of my country and
right. Let me pull it up off the iPad and take it from there instead, since it given trouble on the Okay, good. Should be able to play now.
Whilst I am here.
Right.
On this earth and part of this country and love of my country and the experience I have.
That is so odd.
And the education and all that goes with it, offer myself in service to the people of Trinidad. So let me just make it clear, right, that you have decided to put yourself forward to become the political leader of the PNM in the upcoming internal election. Yes, I have. Okay, well, I mean, Can I ask her a question? Whoa, yeah, just a minute. I mean, that's a little bombshelly, Karen, because I mean, people have saw you and do the things, and there's many people been very supportive of you as well. So I guess that will be a bombshell in Trinidad and Tobago. And be glad, Karen, that you came here and you broke that message here on WZY 95.9 FM. So just so you know, that's going to be all over the internet tomorrow, and we're starting to get calls.
Let me know if you're hearing me. Let me know if you're hearing me. What? You're hearing me now? Yeah? Good. All right. So, what was the last thing you heard? Just tell me what was the last thing you heard. Right. Good. Let me get back into the analysis of Karen Nunes Teixeira. Karen Nunes Teixeira is not attempting to win the PNM internal elections. She knows she can't win the PNM internal elections. Karen Nunes Teixeira is doing what she's doing for two reasons. One, and this is the most important reason, in running for that internal elections, she will put herself in a position where she can, under the guise of contesting an election, smear the People's National Movement and smear the current political leader of the People's National Movement. Her announcing that she's running for political leadership of the party, that's not a bombshell. That's not a bombshell at all, because everybody knows that she's not going to win the internal elections. But the important thing is what she's trying to do by running, which is one, to be able to put information out there about the People's National Movement and about its political leader. And the second thing she's going to be doing is building her profile as a politician, because she has decided she wants to get into the political arena. And so she builds her profile as a politician running for PNM internals. After that PNM internals, she is then going to try to get herself into or aligned with another political entity. And that's it. It's a very, very, very basic game that she is playing here. And so, correct, lovely one, she's going to use all of her insider knowledge of the People's National Movement. At the point in time, she would have had insider knowledge of the People's National Movement. And she's going to come and she's going to talk about those things on a platform. And I'm pretty certain that whatever she talks about, it is going to link right back to the sitting political leader. Because when Dr. Rowley became political leader of the People's National Movement, persons like herself were not, embraced in the inner circle, embraced in the fold. So there is going to be a bit of political insider trading taking place with any campaign that Karen Nunes Teixeira runs. So you all just, get your popcorn ready and sit back and take it in. I'm expecting that as much bacchanal as she could, as much bacchanal as she could put out into the public domain, she is going to put out into the public domain. But I hope when she starts putting information out into the public domain that she addresses two areas: the CLICO bailout and property tax. And why I raised the issue of property tax is that property tax was something that was supposed to have been implemented when she was Minister of Finance. And it didn't get implemented. And there are reasons it didn't get implemented. Reasons to do with legislation and what would have happened with the legislation. So I am hoping that when she decides that she wants to come and share information with the population, that she is ready to share information about the CLICO bailout and what happened under her tenure as Minister of Finance with the CLICO bailout, and of course, why was it not possible to implement property tax when she was Minister of Finance? What was the problems with the legislation that was drafted at that point in time? So I hope that she is in a position to answer those questions, because there are lots of people, and I as people, lots of people who have questions that they want to ask. So that is CLICO Karen, and CLICO Karen bid for political leadership, right? That, so I'm waiting to see how it pan out, because I see that the PNM has announced that its internals will take place. The voting takes place on about 3 days, the 26th and 27th of November, if I have those November dates correct, and then the 4th of December, which is the actual convention date. So I guess, that's when voting going to happen. I haven't heard who the actual candidates are, and yes, I saw the fake list that was circulating. I saw my name on the fake list, and I was like, oh God, really? This is where people reach to now? No, I'm not even remotely interested in running for a position at the governmental level or at the national level, far less at any party level. So no, I don't, y'all ain't get any opportunity to vote for me. Sorry. I ain't think that happening in this lifetime. Next thing, the Board of Inland Revenue. I'm supposed to have a video clip where that is concerned. So let me see if I could find that video clip, because the Minister of Finance, the chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue, the Minister of Finance explained that in the People's Parliament today. Where that explanation is by, I wonder if this is it. Hold on a second there, or like give me 2 seconds here. Add a mute. Right. I wonder if this is it just now.
That matter. But let me deal with the matter that the member for Opochis was so exuberant about.
This is it. Good. Hi, Yvette Clement Superville. Hi, how you doing? Storm Superville? So, big bacchanal in the People Parliament today. And it was as a result of yesterday. Big bacchanal in People Parliament yesterday. Because there is a lady who would have applied to become the chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue. And she was not allowed to apply for the position. She was not appointed to the position, even though she might have been the most senior person in the BIR who would have applied for the post. And I guess from the perspective of seniority, she should have been the most relevant candidate, or the most suitable candidate after having applied. But her name is Rohini Ramkisoon, if I remember correctly. Ms. Ramkisoon was not appointed to be the chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue, and so she took the Minister of Finance, and I guess by proxy the Ministry of Finance, to court. And the Ministry of Finance lost the lawsuit yesterday, and the ruling apparently claims that her not being hired, there was some degree of obstruction. I haven't had an opportunity to read the ruling, so I want to be careful about how I use my words, because I want to cast no aspersions. So I'm going to allow the Minister of Finance to explain the entire situation for himself in his own words, because he explained it in Parliament yesterday.
It was recently determined that it was the responsibility of the Minister of Finance to make a recommendation to Cabinet for the position of Chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue. For some reason, for many, many years, it was assumed wrongly that that was the responsibility of the Public Service Commission, but it is not. The law is quite clear. It is the responsibility of the Minister of Finance to make a recommendation to Cabinet, who would then advise the President to issue the instrument in favor of whoever had been chosen by the Cabinet to be the chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue, whether in a permanent position or an acting position. So this responsibility fell to me recently, Madam Speaker, because the substantive chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue had retired. And there was need, therefore, for me to invoke a process, to follow a process, to arrive at my recommendation to Cabinet. I could have, as members opposite have done sometimes, just gone to Cabinet without any reasons whatsoever and just said, I recommend that Miss A or Mr. B be appointed to act as chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue. This was a very important responsibility and a very important office. After all, Madam Speaker, one was being required to recommend someone to be head of the country's revenue collection agency. So after seeking advice from senior counsel, I was told that the best thing to do was to look at the four most senior persons within the organization and make some inquiries and then interview each of them to arrive at a rational decision with respect to a recommendation to the Cabinet. I did so. One of the persons was under investigation by the Criminal Investigation Unit of the Inland Revenue Division for tax fraud. One of them. I want to repeat that. One of the persons was under investigation by the Criminal Investigation Unit of the Inland Revenue Division for alleged tax fraud. It was my responsibility to draw that matter to the person's attention and ask the person whether they were aware that there was such an investigation. I did so. And, Madam Speaker, after a lot of toing and froing, it was established that there was an investigation and that this person had been interviewed by persons with respect to alleged tax fraud. I therefore found myself unable to recommend such a person to act as chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue. I was taken to court and I was told that my decision not to recommend that particular individual was irrational. And what the judge has ruled is that I should have told the person before they came to the interview that I intended to ask them as to the particulars with respect to the investigation for tax fraud. I should have given them an opportunity to explain to me their side of the story. That is going to be tested by the Court of Appeal, Madam Speaker. As a responsible Minister of Finance.
Remember, there's no appeal filed as yet.
This is not a sub judice matter. I am not speaking on a sub judice matter. This matter will be tested by the Court of Appeal. I can simply say that as a responsible Minister of Finance, if I have to make a recommendation with respect to a person who should act as chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue, and I am aware, and it has been confirmed, that a particular candidate is under investigation for tax fraud, I think I would have to be out of my mind to recommend that person to be the chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue.
So the argument that the Minister of Finance, National Security, that the Minister of Finance is making is that according to the laws, his responsibility is to recommend somebody to the Cabinet, right? To fill the position of chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue. And because he was aware that there was this investigation into the person, he didn't think that it would be wise or prudent or rational of him to recommend somebody to be chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue when that person was under investigation for tax fraud. So I mean, this is according to the minister, this is going forward to the Court of Appeal, because she would have won her part of the case. So it's going forward to the Court of Appeal, and I hope it doesn't go beyond that. But I'd be interested to find out how exactly what exactly would they have suggested the Minister of Finance do in terms of his recommendations to the cabinet. Because I could grasp them saying, well, he should have said something to the candidate prior to the candidate applying or coming into the interview. But I don't think that I'm trying to understand what they could tell the Minister of Finance he should have or ought to have said to the cabinet, right? So it's in the judgment that was stormed. The judge's name is in the newspaper article today, and the article is is in the Express, and it was shared widely. Minister Imbert is also now suing the Express. So he's suing the Express and maybe TV6 as well, because I saw where is that? I think I should have that image here somewhere. I know he is suing. He sent legal letters because the interesting thing is this story made it into the story about the story about him having lost the lawsuit made it in the newspapers, into the newspapers today. So it's a story in the newspapers today. The Minister of Finance would have responded to the ruling having come out in Parliament yesterday afternoon, because when the ruling came out, one of the MPs from the opposition side, I think Coalpot East, I could be wrong, but one of the MPs from the opposition side would have raised the issue of Imbert having lost the lawsuit, right? So it was, Minister Imbert has lost again. And Minister Imbert, by yesterday evening, certainly before 6 p.m. yesterday evening, would have responded and indicated, well, this was, this is what took place, and this was his rationale. And Ricky Ramdas of the Trinidad Express wrote a story today, and in the story today, they claim there's a particular phrase they use where they indicated that Imbert acted in bad faith. Oh, it was Monilal, right? Okay, so then is right. So or one of the Coalpot seats. So it's Coalpot. If it's not Coalpot East, is Coalpot West. I can't remember which of the Coalpots it is. In the Express story today, they claimed that Imbert acted in bad faith. Apparently, according to the ruling, and the language of the ruling is featured here, it wasn't Imbert who acted in bad faith, but rather the claimant. So the person who applied to be chairman of the Board of Inland Revenue, that's the person who acted in bad faith, not the Minister of Finance. And so the Minister of Finance is suing the Express for having misquoted the ruling and claiming that he acted in bad faith. My doggies are misbehaving. So that's the Board of Inland Revenue issue. What else do I want to move on to? So there is this other story as well. This story could have easily been its own life, because when I saw it developing in the newspapers, I thought to myself, we in 2022. There is no media house in this country that doesn't know about the Salary Reviews Commission report. I fed up talk about the SRC report here. As a matter of fact, the last time I did a live, when we did the live about David Lee being charged over the motor vehicle tax exemption, we talked about this Salary Reviews Commission report. This is the most recent comprehensive report that I am aware of. There are other sub-reports that come out from time to time. It's not the only Salary Reviews Commission report. There are lots of other Salary Review Commission reports. But this is the last one I saw that would have been looking at people's remuneration packages in a very, very comprehensive way. So this report, as I would have told you all, deals with, or rather the Salary Reviews Commission is an entity that falls under the office of the president, and that commission has responsibility for determining the remuneration packages of most of the senior level public servants in this country. Let me see if I have that page again. Yes, there is that page, letting you know that these are the various offices that they have oversight of. So the president, the higher judiciary, so not the entire judiciary, but the higher judiciary, judges and possibly judges and magistrates and stuff. The ombudsman, the auditor general, etc., 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 all the way down to local government officials. This report lays out for you what's supposed to be in people's packages. So there was both a story from Jada Lutu, and Jada Lutu is roughly my age. She's around my age. I remember Jada, she's been in media for easily the last 20 years. If I in my mid-40s, Jada had to be late 30s to early 40s herself. And she has been a journalist the entire time. And she has covered the court beat for the majority of the time that I have known her to be a journalist. So my understanding is that Jada is a veteran of the court system in this country. And so, as someone who is a veteran of the court system of this country, I would imagine that a veteran of the court system in this country would know what the Chief Justice's remuneration package is. It's not a secret. The Chief Justice's salary and allowances and everything is laid out in that same report. You could go now and do a Google search for the 98th SRC report, get the entire PDF, download it onto your device, and scroll to the pages that deal with the Chief Justice, and you would see what he's supposed to get as salary, what he's supposed to be getting as allowances, all of the things that the Chief Justice is entitled to. Now, the Chief Justice is the third most important head of organization in this country. So you have the president is head 1, you have the prime minister is head 2, and you have the Chief Justice is head 3. All of these officials are entitled to be housed at the expense of the state. Thus it was, ever shall it be. That is how it has been since forevermore. So they are entitled, there are a list of allowances that they are entitled to, and one of those allowances is a housing allowance. So check out this story that was in the Newsday on Friday of last week. It says, CJ's swimming pool not high on the list. And it is an editorial written by the Newsday that was basically saying that given the guava season that everybody's in, the timing for the Chief Justice to be getting a house with a swimming pool built by the state is not proper timing. But you see, this is where media houses showing their bias. So let me give all you a little bit of backstory. There was a house in St. Clair, on Prada Street in St. Clair, that was the Chief Justice's residence. And I am not talking about Chief Justice Ivor Archie. I mean all of the Chief Justices that the country has ever had. There was an official residence in St. Clair for each Chief Justice. Once the person ascended to that particular position, that particular office, they lived in that household the entire time they were the Chief Justice, because the Chief Justice is, for the most part, being the third arm of our democracy, has to host people, the people from the judicial, from various judiciaries in other parts of the region, other parts of the world, and of course other officials when they arrive here. So the state provides housing for that. When that house was sold, and that house was sold in 1997, and hear the joke, the house is not alleged. The house was sold to a very wealthy businessman in the country back in 1997. The then Chief Justice, Michael de la Bastide, protested against the sale of the house. The house was sold, and the house was sold to a businessman, and the businessman that the house was sold to is believed to have been a very close friend of the then administration, whoever was the then government. The rumor is the house was sold below market value to that businessman. Right? That's one of the allegations, that it was sold below market value to that businessman. Yesterday in the parliament, the Prime Minister addressed the issue of housing for the Chief Justice. And I want you all to hear the explanation as the Prime Minister gives it, because of course there is a lot more information he had that I didn't have. So yes, now which one is it? Right. Yes, now give me a second. Let me pull it up.
Let me just ask someone got up in here, my colleague, someone of them, I don't know which one, got up in here and talking about, oh, it was the famous one from St. Augustine too. My colleague from St. Augustine. It's in the paper that I saw that. It was yeah. Here are the big issue in the papers. It has to do with a provision for the construction of a house for the Chief Justice. Madam Speaker, that was like a red flag to a bull. They're going to build a house for the Chief Justice. I know they saw it in a website somewhere. Madam, these are supposed to be serious politicians. You know. They are the opposition. They call themselves government in waiting. I don't know what they're waiting for. But Madam Speaker, what is the story? There was a house, a state property that belonged to the state, identified as the residence of the Chief Justice on Prada Street in St. Clair. Known only to the UNC, because up to this day, nobody else in this country could tell anybody what drove the decision for the UNC to sell the Chief Justice house to a wealthy businessman on Prada Street, against the objection of the then Chief Justice. Then when another Chief Justice came into office, under the Constitution he has to be housed, super grade housing he has to get. And the Cabinet has no say in that, because as you know, Cabinet cannot interfere with the terms and conditions of any judge, far less Chief Justice. And then today the Chief Justice is in rental accommodation in Goodwood Park at $54,000 a month. That is after the UNC sell the government house, put us to rent, and now that this government is saying that we're going to use that $54,000, because Madam Speaker, you're renting, and you're going to take a mortgage, and you build something even cheaper than what the rental costs. Is that good business? So what they're saying rather than answer for the question that was put to them as to why you sold the Chief Justice house, Azar, they're coming to the Parliament and going to the media to make that an issue, that they're going to build a house for the Chief Justice. Not telling the other part of the story, that taxpayers are currently paying almost $1 million a year in rent. You who hate rent so much, especially when it involves Faris and his family, but you sold the Chief Justice house.
So, a couple things. One, media in this country, for the better part of the last 7 years, have been trying left, right, and center, bending themselves backwards, forwards, sideways, to develop the idea to create a link between the Chief Justice and the government. There has been a long-standing attempt to make as if the judiciary is a compromised judiciary, right? That the Chief Justice somehow is linked in some way to this government. As a matter of fact, there are lots of people on social media who just talk about the Chief Justice and refer to him as the PNM Chief Justice. Mind you, Justice Archie has been there for 3 governments. He was appointed Chief Justice under Prime Minister Manning, served under the United National Congress, and when the United National Congress was in office, That was the government that attempted to offer him silk as a sitting Chief Justice, and people had to write letter to say no, you cannot be accepting silk from a government because it will compromise, you will appear to be compromised. And then of course this current government that has been in office for the last 7 years. Anybody who understands what the Salary Reviews Commission report says will understand that the government has a responsibility to provide housing for the Chief Justice. The cabinet does not get to determine what the Chief Justice is supposed to receive and not receive. That is something that falls under the power of the Salary Reviews Commission, and the Salary Reviews Commission answers to the president. So when you want to pretend that the government is building a house, and of course they don't talk about it as being part of the requirement of the state. So they talk about the swimming pool for this Chief Justice because they want to talk about a luxury item, and they want to rile up the population into thinking, oh, yet another high office holder is getting luxury accommodations while the rest of us catching our ass. Now, whether or not you think he should or shouldn't get a house with, luxury accommodations is immaterial at this point, because the laws of the country indicate that that is what the Chief Justice is entitled to. And the only way that can be changed is not in the parliament. That's not how it gets changed. The only way that gets changed is if the Salary Reviews Commission sits down, deliberates over their next report, and basically says, after we have reviewed the salaries and the remuneration packages of Chief Justices in other parts of the world and compared and contrasted things, we think that this Chief Justice does not deserve to have a housing allowance. Basically, that's what has to happen. No sitting government can interfere with the remuneration package of the Chief Justice. But the way in which that Newsday editorial is written, it is trying to imply that there is some sort of collusion between the government, the executive, and the judiciary, and that the government is providing the Chief Justice with something that he is not entitled to. When everybody knows that according to the Salary Reviews Commission report, the state is supposed to be providing housing to the Chief Justice, and we have been spending $54,000 a month to rent a house in Goodwood Park for the Chief Justice, as opposed to buying a piece of land and putting down a proper facility there that the current Chief Justice and future Chief Justices can live in. I'm seeing comments, and I'm missing some of the comments on the thread, yes. So you have to forgive me. I can't read all of the comments and respond to the comments. And now we come to the meat of the matter. So all it has had, I know it's almost 8 o'clock, but bear with me, right? We're gonna wrap things up. So people who know me well know that I regularly refer to the government as Own Goal United FC. Why? Because more often than not, when this government fumbles, it is not necessarily because the opposition is effective. We actually don't have a very effective opposition. We have an opposition that only know bacchanal. We have an opposition that know how to make noise. We have an opposition that know how to move along, but we don't really have an effective opposition. So there are lots of times when the sitting government will allow itself to fall into traps. And one of the traps that this sitting government does fall into on a fairly regular basis, it falls into the trap of thinking that the media is its friend. So if you were to go back and look at headlines, especially the business newspapers, so Business Express, Business Newsday, Business Guardian, headlines for the month before the budget, so September leading up to the 26th of September, so from late August all the way up to the 26th of September, if you were looking at the headlines, everybody, all of the commentators were preaching doom and gloom. Right? It's going to be a hard budget. It's going to be bitter. It's going to be sour things, rough things, hard. And of course, there are all of the other stories about roads not being paved properly and all of the murders and all of the deaths that were taking place. So you had this building atmosphere of doom and gloom and despair. And then, and then Minister Imbert came and read a budget. The budget had 16 measures. 16, boy? 16, even not 16, 15, sorry. The budget had 15 measures, 15 fiscal measures. And there is only one fiscal measure that we talked about. Now, I want you all to remember something. The Prime Minister would have, back in July thereabouts, come out and at a press conference signaled to the population that the fuel subsidy was far too high, that we had budgeted for $500,000. We had budgeted to spend $500 million on this fuel subsidy. And the fuel subsidy was now, it was close to, at that point in time, it was close to $2 billion. That was the size of the fuel subsidy. So he stated that the government, the Treasury couldn't continue to find $2 billion simply to spend on a fuel subsidy. Because that's $2 billion you have to pull from somewhere else to be able to spend behind the subsidy. So both he and the current Minister of Finance, the then Minister of Finance. So then he and the Minister of Finance, they would have discussed the maths, explained what the fuel subsidy is, explain how we come about the fuel subsidy. They would have explained that there is the refinery cost of gas, and the state then buffers that cost. So no Trinbagonian pays the full price, the full cost of, the full refinery cost of gasoline, whether it was premium, super, or diesel. I believe now people who are buying premium gas, they're paying the full refinery price. I think people who are buying super, they still have a little subsidy on. And of course, diesel is still subsidized because diesel is the fuel for transportation, and they're trying to keep the price of goods and other services that are linked to transportation, they're trying to keep that down. So for the majority of the year, because it was not just July, but July is when I know for certain they would have come out and signaled that there was going to be a further removal of the subsidy. July. So you know this since July. Media houses know this since July. And they would have been talking about gas prices, gas prices, gas prices. There are lots of stories in the newspapers between July and September 26th. Before September. So from July, when the press conference took place, down to September 25th, there were a number of stories about gas, fuel subsidy, whether or not to anticipate a gas hike. Everybody, in my opinion, should have been prepared for some sort of adjustment to the price of gas. Everybody should have been prepared for that. And when the change came, as I anticipated, as other people anticipated, media and the opposition did what I expected them to do, which was to make a lot of noise about the removal of the subsidy and the increase in gas prices. What I didn't expect, what I didn't see coming at all, was that members of the sitting government would have fed directly into the foolishness of media and opposition and come out and jump out themselves and make a set of tone-deaf comments. Because if you know since July that you are signaling to the population that you are going to be removing the fuel subsidy, and you know the nature of Trinidadians, how come it occurred to you that when you make the announcement at the time of the budget, that people obviously going to be in uproar? People obviously going to be up in arms. So the way I see it, the government failed Communications 101. This was all your narrative to control. This was all your story to lead. Nobody else should have been in a position to lead this story, to run this narrative, and to shape public response to this narrative but all you. because you would have known this is what coming in the budget. And because you knew this is what coming in the budget, you were then in a position to be able to say, okay, when this announced in the budget, this is how the public going to respond. Because we know how Trinidadians are. People going to bawl like, oh God, how am I going to manage? And da, 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 da. Right? So you know this coming in the budget. You know how media are going to respond. Media is not your friend. Media not interested in putting out facts and proper information. What media interested in is clickbait, whipping up a firestorm of public opinion and people making a certain noise and running to share stories. That is what media is interested in. And the opposition not interested in saying anything sensible at all. So to me, after that budget get read Monday the 26th and media come and ask you questions, there were a range of ways to respond. One, you could have point to CNG and the options and the alternatives where CNG is concerned. Two, you could have point to hybrid vehicles and the options and availability of hybrid vehicles. Three, you could have start talking about the shift to electric vehicles. And of course, begin to discuss whether or not there needs to be further incentivization with respect to hybrid vehicles or electric vehicles. Those are some of the conversations you could have been having. And then, further to that, you could have pointed to the other 14 fiscal incentives that would have been part of the budget that meant to be helping the population. Because, folks, when you look at the budget and when you look at the fiscal measures in the budget and when you look at the headlines for the last week or so, you'll realize something. The only item from the budget that media or opposition talking about is the removal of the fuel subsidy. They're not talking about anything else, just the removal of the fuel subsidy. That's the only issue that they're referencing. The removal of the fuel subsidy. Nothing else is being discussed at all from that budget. And that's because they want persons to be only focused on the issue of the subsidy and not focused on any of the other items coming out of the budget. So you ain't getting no comprehensive discussion at all. And listen, this is every single media house, every single editorial, every single commentator not speaking to the other fiscal incentives in our budget. So a man stand up and talk for 4 hours, outline an entire global, regional, and local fiscal economic context, and then would have talked about expenditure. And the only thing they would focus on is the fuel subsidy. The further irony is this. The removal of the fuel subsidy is something that would have been signaled since under Kamla Persad Bisessa's time. And let me see if I could find that clip. I know I have the clip here. I just want to make sure I have the foot right. So here it is.
Ministry of Finance.
So Dr. Rowley read this out. I want a little listen to this. And he read this out yesterday in Parliament.
Address made by the Honorable Larry Hawaii, Minister of Finance and the Economy, Thursday, October 4th, 2012, Budget Forum. So my friend from Cuba North, if you go and find that, you will. But let me read it. Let me read it for the population. I'm not talking to anybody on the other side. But you could listen if you wish. Just like you, I'm quoting Madam Speaker, just like you, when the government spends more than that it collects or earns, it has to borrow the difference. This indicates that it's a cost to the future, and I'm very wary of that. So even while I pursue this deficit, it is growth that helps with the process. In technical terms, growth increases the denominator used to compute our debt to GDP ratio and to determine the action and to determine sustainability. Nevertheless, it is something that we will be monitoring closely and will take action to control as quickly as possible. Hence the deadline of bringing us back to a balanced budget by 2016. Therefore, within the next 4 to 5 years, most of the fuel subsidy will need to be taken out of the equation.
So when, after the budget, media comes and asks you or raises questions about the fuel subsidy, why this wasn't one of the planned things in the PNM's arsenal to respond with, to indicate, listen, since 2012, 2013, thereabouts, we're supposed to remove the subsidy. Since 2012, 2013, under the United National Congress, they would have identified that the subsidy has to be removed. Why that didn't come out? Why instead were we hearing comments about, well, people have to think creatively? Because here's the thing. It is not that people don't think creatively. The average person gets up every single day and thinks creatively about how they're going to get to where they have to go and come back home and beat as much traffic as possible. The average person. So that's not, it's never a case where people not thinking creatively where that is concerned. So talking down to our population and speaking to our population as if they themselves not understanding their reality gives the impression that you don't understand their reality. And that is what got people riled up. Not the fuel subsidy being removed, you know. Because I think the majority of persons who are actively paying attention to world news, to what's going on with prices globally, regionally, and elsewhere, and who would have been listening to the budget, I think those persons were aware we're going to get to the point where the subsidy going to be removed. I don't think that what had people riled up was the removal of the subsidy. I think what got people riled up was the approach to the line of questioning. This kind of, well, you know, we know better and we're going to tell them what to do. It is no. We don't have a stupid population here. We might have a population that from time to time does allow itself to be swayed by a lot of things because it's emotive. But we don't have a stupid population here at all. And then when you want to come a couple days later and talk about Coalpot and bicycle, that's not people's reality. I own a Coalpot. I am in my mid-40s. I own a Coalpot. Not because I bought the Coalpot. I inherited the Coalpot from my mother. The last time I used that Coalpot would have been as a child. Not because we had to use the Coalpot, but because we wanted to just, you know, use a Coalpot to see what it's like to use a Coalpot. So when you come in and you're talking about Coalpot, there are whole generations that ever had to use a Coalpot in this lifetime. There are also whole generations that know about a Coalpot and know that the price of LPG is low enough that we don't have to resort to a Coalpot. So if you think that you're talking about Coalpot and you're talking about bicycle to come across as rootsy and down to earth, no, that didn't resonate well with the population either. So you now have a population thinking to themselves, what is really going on with the people that in charge of making decisions for us? Is it that they can't identify with us at all? Is it that their circumstances have changed so drastically for them since having gotten into government that they don't even understand the lived realities of people around them? And then when the question of virtual work and work from home was raised, again with the flippant response. Dr. Rowley needs to understand this. He promised the country back in 2020 that there would be a work from home policy. He, at a press conference, talked about a national work from home policy. He, in 2020, would have set up a Ministry of Digital Transformation. And the whole point of the Ministry of Digital Transformation was so that there would be better digital infrastructure, better technology to allow for work from home, study remotely, and a range of other financial services. So online shopping and a range of digital services. So when your approach 2 years ago was to be progressive about particular issues, and then 2 years later, in 2022, under a budget that is supposed to be securing our future, you say things that sound retrograde and backward. And you say things that sound as if you are speaking down to a population, and you think that the population is speaking to less intelligent than you are. Obviously, the population going to push back. So this isn't about a fuel subsidy, or it isn't just about a fuel subsidy, because people sensed that there were going to be aspects to the budget that was tough. People knew that there were going to be things about the budget that was hard. What people didn't expect, what people didn't anticipate, was a government then coming to speak to the population as if, well, we don't know what's good for us. That is what got people riled up. And if you were following conversation on social media, a number of persons eventually spoke out to say, well, we feel insulted by the comments. Was that the cheapest bag of coal is $24 at Extra Foods? The 20-pound LPG is just around that. I think a 20-pound tanker of gas is either 23 or 20. It might be the same amount of that. But as a small bag of coals. But an LPG tanker gas going and last you for at least 3 months. Me, what our size of bag of coals going and last you for, because coal's expensive. Coal's not cheap, right? And the Coalpot comment was not. The people weren't being thin-skinned with respect to the Coalpot comment. The Coalpot comment was also tone deaf. It was incredibly tone deaf. You don't need to tell anybody what to cook with and not cook with. You just don't need to do that. Yeah, I know it costs $21 off the truck, but I think when you go to the gas stations to get the LPG tanks, you just pay a little bit more, like about at $23 or $24 or something like that. So, it's 21 in the gas stations. Well, there you go. So coal more expensive than LPG, just as I suspected. So there was that, and I felt that those comments, the offhand comment from the Prime Minister, the comment later on about Coalpot, and all who don't want to accept that the Coalpot comment and the get creative about the traffic comment was off, that's all their business. I'm not going to pretend that those comments weren't off, because when I heard those comments, I cringed. I heard the comments and I was like, how you gonna be talking to people so? And then by the weekend when I saw the Coalpot comment, I was like, oh geez and ages, just stop, just hush. That's how I felt. I felt as if they needed to hush. And part of the reason I felt that they needed to hush was because there were so many other measures in the budget that we weren't discussing, that we weren't talking about at all. And I feel like I want to take a few minutes just to look at some of those measures in the budget. So let's look at the budget allocations for 2023, and then after that we could wrap up and everybody could go into bed and hug up and thing, right? So there's the money that we're spending for budget 2023. You have almost $7.5 billion for education and training, almost $7 billion for health, almost $6 billion for national security, social grant, social welfare is $5.4 billion. Works and transport 3.7 billion, public utilities 2.8 billion, rural development 1.8 billion, agriculture 1.3 billion, housing just under $1 billion. And so the budget comes up to $56.1 billion, right? There are a number of things that we don't talk about at all. We just quick to call Imbert tax boot, right? Because of the online tax that he would have introduced a couple, I think what, 2016, 2017, somewhere thereabouts. But we also don't acknowledge that Imbert is one of 2 ministers of finance that reduced people's personal income tax. The first time personal income tax was reduced would have been around 2005, 2006, thereabouts. Somewhere between 2004 to 2006. I don't remember the exact year. But what I do remember is this. PAYE used to be 30% of your salary. So whatever you got as your gross salary, 30% of that would come out and go back to the government. Back then, under the Manning administration, they reduced the figure from 30% to 25%. And then they introduced a tax exemption. The first $60,000, you paid no income tax on that. And that went on for more than 10 years, almost 20 years, right? Where the first $60,000 of your salary, and that is the first $60,000 over a year of income, right? So basically, if you're working for $5,000 a month, you wasn't paying any income tax. You would pay health surcharge and NIS, but you wouldn't be paying any PAYE. Anything over $5,000, that is where you would start to pay PAYE. And then in budget, either the 2016 or the 2017 budget, that is when Minister Imbert came and he raised it from $60,000 to $72,000, right? So it went from 60. So the first, if you were making $6,000 a month, you didn't have to pay income tax. And then they raised it to $7,000 a month. So if you were if you were earning $7,000 a month or less, you were not paying income tax, only PAYE and health surcharge. Those tax exemptions make a difference to your take-home salary. Because the minute your exemption increases, right, the threshold on the exemption increases, it means that you have more money that you are taking home as your income to spend on other things. So in the budget, Imbert gets up and he talks about personal income tax allowance. He talks about a VAT threshold, right? So these are a list of the things, the other incentives. Personal income tax allowance increased from $84,000 to $90,000 a year. The VAT registration threshold is also increased. Do you know what that means? Let me explain what that means. If you have raised the VAT registration threshold from $500,000 to $600,000, it means that people who have businesses and charge in VAT, they don't have to pay VAT until and unless they have begun to make $600,000 in terms of their income. That makes a difference to a business. You also had a renewable energy rebate for agriculture. I ain't hearing anybody complaining about a renewable energy rebate. Nobody complaining about that at all. There's also a subsidy for housing and village improvement programs. So if you're building a house, if you're constructing a house under the housing and village improvement program, there is an actual program called that, right? If you're building a house, they said here the amount paid by government applicable for the construction of a basic 2-bedroom housing unit from $145,000 will increase to the following levels. So if you build in a house and you apply for money through this program, you could get $165,000 to construct a house on flat land. Or you could get $170,000 to construct on undulating land and $175,000 to construct on hilly lands. This program has been accessed and assists so many persons throughout the country. So people who know they're looking to build and who know they could qualify for this housing and village improvement program, I'm hopeful that they are aware that this took place. Not just the fuel subsidy, but that there's an increase in how much money they can access from the government if they want to build a home, either on flat land, undulating land, or hilly land. Then companies that are doing manufacturing, they got a tax credit as well. And the details of the tax credit are there. Energy companies also got an investment tax credit. I can't remember what the supplemental petroleum tax is about, so I can't go into that too much. We have people who provide in electronic payment options. They are getting a one-time tax credit as well. So now a number of these incentives are meant to promote businesses, to enhance businesses, to give businesses more incentives to be able to expand. If you are incentivizing business, let me rock back for a second and think about things. You're in a situation where inflation is going up. People bawling for how things hard and they need money. Doesn't it make sense? Does it not stand to reason that you're going to put things in the budget to incentivize the business sector so that business will invest more, expand more, and end up hiring more people? So that way the economy keeps turning over, the economy keeps going. So I am sitting down during the week thinking to myself, but these people hear the same budget that I hear? Because I didn't only hear about fuel prices. That's not the only thing I heard. I am listening and I'm hearing, well, okay, there are other things that are meant to be done. So you have here exemption from corporation taxes for small companies. Incentives for renewable energy, right? So VAT on new equipment to be waived if you're going to be investing in renewable energy, whether it's through wind, solar, water. Then, of course, the school to work apprenticeship allowance. So they are attempting to get persons between the ages of 16 to 25 to be hired. So they're trying to encourage businesses to hire young people to come in and work and be apprenticed. And of a tax amnesty, more gate assistance, especially for people who in technical vocational areas, and of course the big bogey, fuel prices. So of the 16 things, because the 16th thing is the transport grant facility, right? The $1,000, the one-time $1,000 payment. Of the 16 items, the 16 big ticket things that the Minister of Finance would have outlined, the one thing that everybody was up in arms about is this thing here, fuel prices. That's the one thing. Media carry on about it for the entire week. Opposition carry on about it for the entire week. The debate done in the lower house and we at the standing finance committee level, and they're still complaining about the fuel subsidy. Nobody wants to admit that the fuel subsidy was actually crippling the government. Crippling the government in that there is so much money that they would have been spending on the fuel subsidy, and that money could easily be used in other ways. And last evening, I want to move from the incentives a little bit. Last evening in the Parliament, when the Minister of Finance was wrapping up, he had the opportunity to talk about a range of things that would have happened. And there's at least one thing, there are at least one or two bits I want you to hear from him. Let me play one of the clips for you, right? There are two clips I want to play.
But not the UNC, not the brilliant UNC. They took out the whole $15 billion out of the NGC retained earnings account. They took it all out and used it for recurrent expenditure for the government, and left the NGC starved of cash. So they couldn't invest in projects, and they couldn't grow, and they couldn't expand their business. That again is what we inherited. That's the brilliant financial management of the UNC. Take $15 billion in retained earnings out of the NGC, and starve the NGC of cash so it couldn't get involved in any forward-looking projects.
And there's one other clip just now. I just need to remember which timestamp it is.
They ramp up the expenditure profile of the country, and even though revenue is increasing quite considerably, it wasn't enough for them. So I asked the question, what kind of government with those kind of revenues, with all the brilliant economists on their side, would decide to run persistent budget deficits for 5 years?
Now, I want to contextualize something here. There's a bit from before, but it's a really long piece where he talks about, he goes back into the expenditure, and he recounts for the parliament how much money they spent, how much revenue they earned, as when I say they, the People's Partnership, how much revenue they earned between 2010 and 2015, each of the years, and the fact that they were earning more and more revenue each year, but they were also spending more and more each year. So the budgets became deficit budgets, and they didn't need to be deficit budgets because the government at that point in time, energy prices were so high. We were earning enough money where we could have had balanced budgets for that 5-year period. But with more money coming in, the People's Partnership, kept spending even more than they were earning. So they were spending the revenue and also going into the overdraft. And so he asks this question.
In a row, when you don't have to. What kind of government will increase its expenditure by $6 billion in 1 year when you don't have to? I asked the question, why did they have to engage in all of that additional expenditure? Where was all that money going? What was the thinking behind? What was the fiscal thinking? What was all that extra money for? The question is easy. It's an easy question. Because the more that you spend, the more you could thief, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. 48-4. Madam.
Member. I'd ask you to withdraw that.
Certainly, I withdraw it. The more that you spend, the more you can misappropriate.
I still think, member, I'll ask you to withdraw that. You can find another word.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The more that you spend, the more there is to disappear into strange places. But I make the point because I have not heard a single economist inside or outside of here analyze this behavior of the UNC administration. You come in, you meet an expenditure profile of 46 billion, and you ramp it up to 62 billion, and you run persistent budget deficits every year, which you don't have to.
So against that backdrop, right, you are aware that Larry Hawaii would have said, since back in 2012, 2013, thereabouts, that this is what needs to be done. You are aware that the United National Congress for 5 years ran consecutive deficit budgets. And then when you came into government, you had to deal with 2 oil shocks and a pandemic. Against that backdrop, when media comes to ask you certain questions, you ought to be in a position where you could point out, these are all of the things that we have had to deal with. And this is why we have made the decision to take the hard decisions that the country needs to have taken so that we could head in the next direction. Budget 2023 didn't need defending. Nobody needed to come out to defend Budget 2023. Budget 2023 just needs explaining, because it is not anywhere near as scary a budget as people would have you believe. You don't have to take my word for it. The entire budget is online. It is there as a physical document on the Ministry of Finance's website. It is also there as something that you could listen to on the Parliament channel. If you go back and you listen to the explanation behind things, and you listen to the various fiscal incentives and what the incentives are meant to do, you will realize that there is far more going on in Budget 2023 than a fuel subsidy increase, than the fuel subsidy being reduced so that people's gasoline budget goes up. And it is not a situation where there aren't alternatives. But there are other things that the government needs to be doing. The government needs to work on public transportation from the PTSC side of things. The government also needs to work on a proper work from home policy that will allow people a certain amount of flexibility. So that way, some of the challenges we have to face in terms of ridiculous hours on the road, ridiculous amounts of time in traffic, leaving home 3-4 o'clock in the morning just to reach to work on time for 8 a.m., those things come to an end. So I'm not going to say that people don't have a right to be upset about the subsidy. You could choose to be upset about it. You could choose to not be upset about it. But I will say that there is a lot more from a management perspective that the government can be doing to alleviate the situation for the population. And please, for the love of God, control all the narrative. Right? There was no need for people to feel so insulted in the last week. There were lots of other ways to talk about this budget. And there we have it, folks. I can wrap up now. I could go on, put 2 corn to roast on a coal pot. That's what I'm thinking that I'm going to be doing this evening. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm going to be sticking on the YouTube platform. So before you log off, please make sure and like the channel and hit the subscribe button, so that way you will get more notifications in future. I will of course be putting up the link on Facebook whenever I'm going to be doing a live. I'll make sure the link to the YouTube show is going to be up. But I'm not even going to bother to beat up with Facebook anymore. I can't deal up with all of the changes. I can't deal up with all of that nonsense anymore. So make sure you follow the channel to get all of the latest from me. Enjoy the rest of the evening, folks. Bye.